All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Now, from your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app, bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecast, radar, and Indiana sports, all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere. Local news source. This is All Indiana Politics.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Governor Mike Braun says it's up to the legislature whether to hold a session on extending the state's gas tax holiday. That's part of a new special podcast interview with our Garrett Bergquist. The governor also explained how his business and farming experience shaped his view on how the state should be run.
You worked for Meyer Distributing for 37 years, and you eventually owned that business, and you frequently call on your business background. Tell me how you first got to work there.
Go there. The office is in like a used mobile home. The building was, built in the late 30s, so it was not very impressive. And it was selling mostly to farmers, and that was 6 months before the farm crisis. So everything I learned was not necessarily getting an undergraduate degree in economics at Wabash. That came in maybe handier when I was in the Senate, but it was mostly survival. And I describe it as turning the lights on in the morning, off in the evening, everything in between. We only had 20 employees, and it was that way for 17 years. And the business was associated with installing equipment, kind of metal fabrication to boot, selling to farmers. So fall of that year, it was wobbly, it was circling the drain, it was survival mode. So there wasn't much overhead there, thank goodness, because it was a depreciated facility. But I got really good at how to live within your means, and then I've used that kind of as a metaphor for fixing and turning around the business. Turned around the business with starting a used truck and equipment business and fancy MBA, used truck dealer. Well, that's the real world. And then started doing a milk run on truck accessories, which after 17 years, I could see it was scalable.
From what you described with Meyer Distributing, you kind of touched on two major sectors here in Indiana. You touched on the agricultural economy because you were providing a lot of equipment to farmers, and then also more broadly the automotive sector. What are some things that those two have really taught you about Indiana's economy as a whole?
Well, it tells me, like Steele and Gary, when you do have an economy that isn't diversified enough, when Steele kind of whooshed out of the country, Gary was our second largest city, about 180,000 people. Now it's 60. It's a shell of itself. And we had policies that were promoting that. We're still wrestling with it now, trying to onshore a lot of those industries that paid high wages. And then we also need to be on the leading edge of the even higher wages, like biosciences, like a quantum corridor. Indiana's got the ability to maybe be the technology hub of the country, where that's been mostly on each coast. Those places, though, don't have great environments for businesses staying put. People are moving out of New York and California, Illinois. Maybe not Massachusetts as much, but somewhat. So agriculture, which didn't grow up on a farm, but I've been involved as a tree farmer from the late 80s. I got involved in the row crop side of it in the mid-90s, and there's not a harder job out there. Back when I got started 25 years ago, you could put an acre of soybeans out for $70 worth of inputs. Corn $140. Now it's $400 and $800 respectively. Equipment costs a fortune. Land's expensive. So farmers have got the toughest job out there, and many of them are small businesses that suffer from all those disadvantages, buying all their inputs from larger corporations. Big corporations, big government, which was Obamacare on health care, Did you ever imagine that was going to be done more effectively, more efficiently, less cost, and better? No.
We've already talked a little bit about affordability in this conversation. That does lead me into kind of the biggest affordability issue right now, that being gas prices as a result of the Iran war. You suspended the state's gas tax, both gas taxes, earlier this year. For our viewers and listeners, the state has two taxes. There's the use tax, then there's also the excise tax. Walk me through that decision-making. How soon after the war began that you first start to consider, maybe I need to do something about this?
Number one, we couldn't do anything about it unless we've turned the state government around. And remember, we dealt with that very austere forecast that was faulty, that was based on tariffs. And that was right at the tail end of this session when we wrestled with property taxes. And you could see affordability was the big issue when I ran. And it was average to low income households that owned a home. They felt the property taxes were becoming too burdensome. Then gasoline came along. Of course, I think what we're doing in trying to finally put the Iran issue at bay, it's been going on for decades, and this is the administration that's only backed up negotiations with some real consequences if you don't do it, and we're seeing that play out. But we couldn't have done it if we weren't running the state to where it's actually giving better results to Hoosier taxpayers.
Going back to the suspensions itself, you started by suspending just the use tax. You left the excise tax in place for a month. Then you decided to go ahead and pull the plug on both of them. Tell me a little bit more about your decision-making there, how you weighed the pros and cons for
I
each.
didn't think it was enough relief when you just took the use tax in itself. There was more in the excise tax. Adding them together, was somewhere a little over 60 cents. And to me, when it was just around 30 cents, when you did both of them, it made a difference. So excise tax actually constituted, I think, close to about $90 million a month, and the use tax was somewhere a little over $50 million. So to me, when you put them together, that even was more meaningful. And the fact that we were the only state that did it and could afford to do it says a lot about how we're running state government.
Your executive orders have a hard out of August 6th. Based on where we are right now, if gas price trends continue, at least at this point, do you think that you might need to call the legislature in for a special session?
That would have to be something the legislature is interested in doing, because calling them into session doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do something about it. And I think since, regardless of what's happening in the Middle East, I think oil is going to be escorted through the straits. That's why you haven't seen a real spike up. You'll see a little bit of wobbling. I think in general, Iran too is getting the message that if they're not going to bargain faithfully, they're going to pay the price economically and with force that's going to make them think twice about digging in. They were able to get by with that with prior administrations because none of the prior administrations actually put teeth into it. So I think that could become an issue. I think it's going to stay where it is because I think we're going to increasingly see how oil produced there is going to find its way to the markets, not only through the strait, but through other ways as well.
All right, coming up, tanks, but no tanks. How the state is acting now to prevent a big mess later. Welcome back. A state program aims to remove hundreds of old gas tanks from the ground. Garrett Kenney headed to Martinsville to find out why they're doing it and how it can save taxpayer money.
You typically can't see underground storage tanks like this one because, well, they're underground. Indiana's I-Team got a unique look at a state program that's replacing aging tanks one by one. At the Morgan County Highway Department, workers gas up their county vehicles. Underground storage tanks hold that gas. Steps away sit aging gas and diesel storage tanks. They're 30 years old. The county wants them gone.
You could leak fuel into the ground and it goes into the groundwater, and it's very important to stay on top of things and change things out when it's time.
Morgan County's getting help from the state of Indiana to pull them out of the ground. A statewide program reimburses tank owners for up to 50% of the removal cost.
It would cost the taxpayers more money if we didn't have that, so this is the time was near and needed to happen, so that it was a big savings.
Removing and replacing gas storage tanks can cost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It's a big deal.
You can find underground storage tanks all over your community. Gas stations, airports, police and fire stations, schools, you name it.
Tanks that are underground, they can rust, things can happen, and releases can occur.
The state wants to protect our groundwater. In 2023, the legislature created a reimbursement program, and each year, $20 million goes into it.
The money is generated by a penny per gallon tax for fuel that's coming into the state of Indiana.
Tim Veach is the petroleum branch chief at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. What makes this program so special?
Indiana's program is unique in that it's reimbursing owners directly for their expenses. A lot of states have grant or low interest loan programs, but Indiana is actually giving that money directly back to the owner.
IDEM is spreading the word through mailers, their inspectors, and other means. Once a tank is out of the ground, they can test the soil for any releases or leaks. So far, more than 500 tanks have been removed or closed under the program. An estimated 700 are still left to go. Because the fiscal year just started, Indiana has another $20 million for this program ready to go. Reporting in Martinsville, I'm Kenney with Indiana's I-Team.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team looks into the growing debate over municipal wheel taxes in Indiana.
The opinions expressed by guests on this broadcast are solely of those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Circle City Broadcasting.
Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Matt Bell and Democrat Carly Macer. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, sir.
Absolutely. So, as you know, the city of Greenwood this past week approved the new wheel tax. This, of course, coming after Mayor Joe Hogsett vetoed the similar wheel tax, although much higher, here in Indianapolis. So, Matt, I'll start with you. How do you see this playing out in other cities and towns across the area?
Well, I think the reality is that communities are going to have skin in the game for road funding in Indiana. Look, our current tax structure just doesn't provide barely enough today for maintenance and preservation, certainly for no new projects.
Right.
So if we want to keep our tax circumstance as manageable as possible, all stakeholders have to have skin in the game. I think it's appropriate for for local communities to adopt wheel taxes. It shows a partnership with the state, building, maintaining, and preserving roads, and I think more communities are going to have to make that decision.
Carly?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. Also, I would say the state could do more. I think that we know that the state can do more, and I think that it isn't that cities are misspending or not even being responsible. It is there's just not enough. I think the state can lead, and I think the state's responsibility, it's one of the strongest responsibilities for government in general. Our roads should be there. So I know that cities are doing everything that they can. Yeah. It's either that or potholes.
Right.
So figure it out.
Sure.
Right. So
that said, though, do you think that more cities and city councils will approve or kind of go the way that
Well, really, I think they'll have to eventually. Unless we do something more on a state level, I think they will have to eventually. What's the other option for, really, the roads to crumble?
Right.
They're doing what they have to
And
do.
the challenges are so different from community to community. So to say a state program can fix this needs to be part of the mix, but locally you're going to have to focus. The challenges in Greenwood are different than the challenges in Indianapolis.
Absolutely.
And I think that's true in communities across the state. Every community has to find their way to contribute to this. No one is going to come save us from road funding.
When you say the state has to do more, expand upon that a little bit, because, and I know we've talked about it on previous shows, that the reason why a lot of these municipalities want to expand the taxes is because they want to be able to get that funding from the state. Right. Would they then have to lower the amount in order to get the matching? Is that what you're
Possibly. I know for many, many years here in Marion County, there was some mathematical errors, shall we say, of where we maybe weren't getting all the funding dollars that we should have for many years, and now we're here in this boat. So yes, I think that there's going to be people smarter than I looking at that fiscally of how we can do more to support Hoosiers whenever it comes to, obviously, what we're paying at the pump.
I think we can all agree the roads have to get better.
Yes, they do.
We'll see what happens. Let's talk about that interview that we just heard about from the governor, Braun. Governor Braun telling us that he has seen no indication that the legislature, of course, is willing to hold a special session on whether or not to extend his gas tax suspension. Both of Indiana gas taxes will go back into effect on August 7th unless the legislature extends that suspension. So the governor cannot extend the tax holiday any further by executive order. Carly, we'll start with you here. At this point, how likely is it that Indiana's gas tax returns on August 7th?
Yeah, well, I think we would have heard about it by now. I would have hoped that there would have been more conversation from the legislature if they were going to reconvene. That hasn't, I haven't heard that conversation. I may not be in the know as much as I used to, but I don't expect that to be a real high chance. But I think it's important that the governor put it out there, but it's the will of the legislature and the third floor. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But my prediction is I'm not seeing that happen now, but will that be a big discussion as we move forward into the next session? Absolutely. I definitely see that happening.
Yeah. So Matt, if this does happen, gas taxes go back up on August 7th. How do you think this plays out politically for Republicans come November?
Well, I think it's a real challenge. Clearly, affordability is what is on every American's mind right now, whether they are in Indiana or any other state across the country. This is a painful decision that folks have to make. I think the governor very rightly said, look, I want to give Hoosiers who are suffering some relief this summer. And we are in a fiscal position to be able to do that based on a high-performing economy and great state government. I think the challenge going forward, if you're a budget writer in the State House, is how long does this crisis last? How long am I suspending a gas tax for? And what does that mean to my other responsibilities as a state? What does that mean to education funding? And I think it's difficult for them to make that decision right now. I think everyone is concerned about what happens to Hoosiers. I do expect Hoosiers will be angry when they see prices return to what are national averages. But I think Governor Braun's done everything he can to assuage that concern, and the legislature wants to take a good hard look at it in 2027 and beyond.
Yeah, and the governor has inherited this situation, obviously, from President Trump and the Iran war and where we're at, even globally. It is how we handle it and how we move forward, and that's just a fact. So we'll see how it goes.
If the governor says, hey, let's try to get a special, or at least is pushing for it, how likely do you think that might be actually happen?
I don't think it's very likely to see that happen now. But do I see that as a big priority come session time? Absolutely.
Yeah, Matt?
I think I agree with Carly on that. You know, it's been a long year for the Indiana legislature. They came in December and worked in a contentious way, difficult session to get through, elections on the horizon. I think that budget writers in particular and fiscal leaders are really looking toward 27. How do we make significant reforms that are lasting and that meet our whole financial profile? So I think it's unlikely as well. I think they'll be back in November to organize and January to legislate.
Okay, well, we keep an eye on that. In other news, the governor has named another new commissioner to Indiana's Utility Regulatory Commission. This means 4 of the 5 commissioners are now Braun appointees. Matt, given what we saw with the replacement of the commission chair earlier this summer, is it possible the commission stops approving rate increases at all?
Well, that is a judicial body, and they're going to look at the evidence in every case. But the appointer of those judges, Governor Braun, has made it abundantly clear that I'm on the side of Hoosier ratepayers, electric ratepayers. I want to see their rates go down, and I want to appoint judges who will help me achieve that goal. He's pushed incredibly hard on the issue of rate affordability in Indiana, and I think he's asking his administration's appointees to come along with him. This is not a time when Hoosiers should be forced to endure more rate increases. Power, healthcare, gas next week, a lot of challenges for Hoosier families going forward, and so yeah.
Okay. Carly, how unusual is this?
In my experience, it seems a bit unusual. I do understand and agree for the most part with what Matt is saying as well about the governor should be able to appoint whoever. But anytime there's continued turnover, it always creates that uncertainty and untrust. And then also this independent body that we're supposed to have that now it seems like just like national politics, it's like, well, if I don't agree with this person, I'll just remove them or vice versa. It starts to feel like that. So it creates a little bit of uncertainty. But again, I do appreciate what the governor has been doing and overseeing and understanding why, but it does create that uncertainty and makes people take a second look at what we're doing and Governor Braun and his decisions there. But again, it's supposed to be an independent body, and yet I'm seeing that with a few administrations within under Governor Braun that's happening now. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yes, we will. Quickly, Matt, 30 seconds left. Again, to that point, the politics of it all, does that impact the November elections? Because the optics are huge here.
Yeah, I think it does in a very positive way. I think Hoosiers see a governor who is fighting for them, who is saying, I want you to pay lower electricity rates. There's no reason that your rates have gone up faster than any other state in the nation over the last decade. I think that that's a bully pulpit the governor can use and should use effectively. And it's time for utilities to tighten their belts, just like every Hoosier has.
It is, but I would say, I would just finish with, this has been a Republican-led state for many years.
That's true. Good to see you both. Thank you.
Great to see you, sir.
We'll be right back.
The opinions expressed by guests on this broadcast are solely of those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Circle City Broadcasting.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll, of course, be back here next Sunday. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.